Boston College football now has 2 new 4-star recruits, and this is just what the doctor ordered.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. I'm the editor of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network, and the host of this great show. We are a daily Boston College podcast available 5 days a week, everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube. If you're looking for daily Boston College news, analysis, scoops, and more, you are in the right place, and this show is brought to you today by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, I want to shout out, before we start off today's show, all our everydayers, all of you who make Locked On Boston College your first listen every single day. Thank you so much for choosing us. All you have to do is hit that play button. You're going to get all your Boston College news right here. Now, on today's show, camp starts this week. Excitement abound as Boston College looks to build upon last year's success. We'll look at 4 names I am pumped to watch as camp starts. And to kick things off, 2 new 4-star recruits. BC didn't have anyone commit. I'll explain what all of this means and why there are 2 new 4-stars in just a moment. Now, let's kick that off. On Wednesday last week, Boston College added 2 new 4-stars to their ranks without getting a single commitment. What ended up happening? In the world of college football recruiting services, On3 and Rivals merged. They are 2 of the 3 bigger recruiting services, other than 247, which yours truly works for. And that means that the 247 composite rankings have changed. Now, the composite rankings on 247, there's 2 different rankings you can see. There's the regular rankings that 247 does, and composite takes all of the recruiting services, their ratings, meshes them together, and adds up to an average of what their rating is. And so with On3 and Rivals merging, that takes one of them out of the picture and changes a bunch of numbers. And why doing this, probably because Rivals just had like kind of this bland rating system that really didn't do all that much, BC saw 2 of their commitments get a huge bump. And that was Phillips Exeter offensive lineman Marek and Catholic Memorial offensive lineman Marc Antunes. They are now both 4-star recruits. This is a big deal for Boston College because now you are up to 3. Now, Marek, absolutely, I could see him being a 4-star right off the bat. You know, a lot of scouts I know that saw him at camp last year, they said, AJ, this guy's a big deal. And the fact that BC is in good shape, that, you know, his head coach knew Jonathan DiBiaso really well because Jonathan DiBiaso went to Phillips Exeter and they landed him. And I think he went to Maryland in Rutgers. I think he had a few other visits that he took. He ends up at Boston College. Boom. You have a 4-star local offensive lineman. Tell me that hasn't worked well in the past. Drew Kendall, Chris Lindstrom, Alec Lindstrom, you know, you go on and on and on. There's plenty of, other guys that have been around this area that have been good recruits. Ozzie Trapillo, can't leave him out either. So that's a good one. And then Marc Antunes. Now, Marc Antunes is one that I think a lot of recruiting fans who are diehard into certain analytics need to relax about. Because one thing I hear about, and I see it on my message board a lot, are people who are just sucked in to offer lists. They are just so, focused. Does that guy have this offer? Does this, and that's how they brand any player. If you look at Marc Antunes' offer list, you'd be like, so this is just, who is this? You compare him to a guy like U-Haul or Marky Walbridge, and you're going, wait, why is he so, why are BC fans excited about this guy? Why does AJ care? You watch him play and you hear about his scouting reports, and then you see the dude, he's huge, and you understand why he's a big deal. I think his only other offer that he's announced is Syracuse. That is because BC got in early. Catholic Memorial Jonathan DiBiaso's dad is the coach there. They have a great pipeline there. They've brought in a ton of recruits from Catholic Memorial, whether it's Makai Dodd or Max Tucker or Jaden Skeet. You can go down the list. There's a huge group that have come from there. Marc Antunes is the latest. Now, he's a 4-star too. This, again, is good news for Boston College. You now have 3. The third being Mason Leak of Avon Old Farms. He transferred from Bacon Academy. I love Bacon, but that's a good move for him because Avon Old Farms is a bigger program and it's going to give him more, I think, a better opportunity moving forward. So you have these 3. Now, all that, to me, the negativity that you had at the end of June, after you missed out on Markey, after you missed out on Kai Pritchard and Carter Gooden, it tempers a little bit to me because now you have a bunch of guys, and all 3 of them were committed a long time ago. So this isn't like new additions to your 4 stars, but now you have 3 4-stars. You now can look at this class a little differently because that's what a lot of folks, and me too, are going to view this class on. How many high edge guys are you getting? Now, the negative part about this, there's a few guys that I was like, what? Why are they rated so low? And that confused me. Guys like Dom Funk, who had offers from Wisconsin, Pitt, he had a ton of offers. And Mac Fitzgerald, who, if you've listened to this podcast, I've said should be a 4-star and probably will be by the end of his senior season. He's near the bottom of this class because I'm guessing ESPN has him low. I don't get ESPN's rating service a lot because sometimes they're just way off, but those 2 are way down now. So what is the class ranking though? It's 35, which is about pretty similar to what they are on the 247 ranking scale. But again, doesn't it feel better to say you have 3 4-stars in your class, that you have 3 guys that have that 4-star? That makes it just feel like Bill O'Brien's building something, because it took you until October last year to get or actually it was December to get a 4-star. They didn't have a 4-star under O'Brien until Sterling Sanders had signed with BC, and then 247 gave him a bump after they watched him at camp. That was much later. Now you have 3 already, and you have the potential to add more later. So that is a good sign. That's the development and building of what you're going to do. And you're going to only get more if you continue to win, if you continue to build on what you did last year. So this is a step in the right direction. This is a good sign. And you know what? You've seen me talk about some of these guys being underrated and not developed. They're not getting the respect they deserve. Hey, 2 of them just got the respect they should have gotten. And that's a good thing for BC. In just a moment, camp starts this week. I'm going to give you 4 names. I'm going to start off with 2. We'll do 2 a segment of guys I'm excited for. The first 2 play the exact same position. They may not be the guys in line for the most starts next year, but man, their development and excitement around them are sky high. I'll explain who those are in just a moment. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. With Monarch, I've used it to track finances with my wife, our spending. How are we doing as a family spending and saving? We want to make sure we take care of our future, make sure our kids have a good future. We are able to track all of that with Monarch, and it's so easy to use. So you too can take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. This is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. And to all my everydayers out there, thank you for everyone out there that listened to all 5 episodes last week. If you have not already, go back and listen to them. If you want to get yourself psyched up for camp, there's 5 great episodes back there. Check it out on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Now, camp starts on this week. We don't have the official start date because I don't know, BC just hasn't emailed us. I think it's probably starting on Wednesday. That's my guess. I'm sure by the time I record this, we'll find out when it starts, but it's probably going to start on Wednesday. And the purpose of this, before we even get to camp, and we'll have coverage, and I'll get all the details of everything going on at camp. I have some names I'm excited to watch for. I'm going to give you 4 over our last 2 segments of guys I'm just really pumped to see where they're at and see how they fit into everything. So the first 2 play the exact same position. It's kind of what I teased before we came into the segment. And they're wide receivers. At camp, I already kind of get the idea of what Reed Harris, Jaden Skeet, and Lewis Bond can do. Jaden Skeet's healthy. Reed Harris, he is just a baller. He's just getting better and better. And Lewis Bond is, he could be one of the top 5 wide receivers in the ACC this year. Just the amount of work that he does and the chip on the shoulder that he has all the time, which is great. But the 2 that I want to get into, the first I want to talk about is VJ Wilkins. What he can do to this offense, I think, is understated this year, because if they have either Grayson James or Dylan Lonergan who can get him the ball, I think there is a great possibility that he is a guy that we're watching highlight films when it comes to November, because he just developed so quickly into an ACC level game plan during the spring that I feel like even if you're playing 3 wide receivers and your top 3 are Skeet, Bond, and Harris, you got to find a way to get Wilkins on the field. This is a guy that's going to take tops off of defense. He's going to be explosive. I don't throw around Zay Flowers' name a lot because I don't want to, but to me, VJ Wilkins is the type of wide receiver that reminds me of him, because he's just so difficult to tackle in the secondary and when he gets out there. And this is against a good BC secondary. This is not playing against guys that are, he's not playing against the second team and whatnot. He's out there lining up against guys like Max Tucker and Ashton McShane and, really good secondary players, and he's beating them out on some of these plays. So to see him and what he could bring to this offense, if he continues what he did during the spring, which was, and I've said this before, big explosive plays every single practice, Bill O'Brien and Will Lawing are going to have to get him onto the field. He has to play. You can't keep him on the bench. Last year, Jaden McGowan, you brought him in to basically do the same thing. He was an explosive player for Vanderbilt. He comes in, and I've said this before, not a knock on the kid. He just didn't fit. From day one, I never really saw him do much of anything for BC. He comes in and he had, 2 catches for 0 yards, and he was a complete non-factor on the season. I see the complete 180 with VJ Wilkins. This is a kid where every practice you turn and watch, and then you hear the whooping from the sidelines, and it's him blasting off to something. It's every practice he has a play like that. And so that is something to get excited about for camp, because if he builds on that, they're going to make him a feature of this offense. There's no way that VJ Wilkins is not going to be a feature if he continues just to play so well. And so that's a really a good addition, because if you put him out there, think about this. You put him out there with Reed Harris, who's 6'5", and as we saw at the end of last year, once you've made him a part of your offense, he just flourished. And Lewis Bond, who is the epitome of consistency and just a great focal point for any quarterback. You now have 3 wide receivers in addition to the other ones I'm talking about, and Jaden Skeet. You have some options here. Now, we're going to have to continue to see how he develops. And, what will be fun to watch is, Amari Jackson's going to be back during the summer. Will he go on him? Because that's a really good test. Like, Amari Jackson's really good as cornerback for BC. Or Max Tucker. Like, how does Wilkins look against those kind of guys? Again, that'll be something to watch for. The second name on that position that I'm just dying to watch is a freshman. And I mentioned him in my column on 5 freshmen I'm watching during camp. That's Nedrick Bolden. Again, when you talk about players during the spring that just caught my eyes, Nedrick Bolden was right up there. And they threw him out there a lot in different packages and different things to do. And what caught my eye for a freshman, he's got good size, good agility and speed, like he's quick, but his hands, man, he's got strong hands, because there were some contested throws out there and he just ripped them out. And so that's a good sign. Like when you have a wide receiver just rips the ball out of the air, that's good. You don't want wide receivers that are weak with that kind of stuff. And Nedrick Bolden is not at all. So, I'm not sure what his role will be, because BC's not going air raid with like 5 wide receivers, so you're not going to see him a ton out there. But injuries happen. There's going to be packages where you might want to use some other guys. It's just part of a long season. So if he continues to work up, does he bump a guy like Jonathan Montague and get up higher on the depth chart, or does Montague continue to hold his spot? This is all what camp is about. So I'm interested to see how he kind of works his way around that depth chart, and how, whether it's Dylan Lonergan or Grayson James, how they get him the ball, because he's another guy, while you have your starters and guys, they're going to do the thing that you need them to do. Bolden's one that he's going to be your future soon, because next year you lose Lewis Bond, and you're going to need other guys to step up. And Nedrick Bolden looks like a guy that could be that guy next year. So whether it's filling in at spots and injury, guys getting dinged up a little bit, you get Nedrick Bolden out there, he could be a guy to watch for. But there's other freshmen too, like Will Samaj Fleming. We haven't seen him play yet because he's just enrolled this summer. What is he going to look like? Will Dawson Pug, what will he look like? He had a decent spring too. Development happens. That's what Bill O'Brien's all about. Will he take that jump? I liked Bolden the best, but who knows? That's what camp is all about, right? So those are 2. The next, I have one more on offense and I got one on defense. These are 2 more players that I am just absolutely pumped to watch for. And one of them is going to be part of the biggest position battle of the summer. I'll explain who that is in just a moment. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. I have been using them for all sorts of things, including football and college and minor league baseball. I go to the Woo Sox games with my family. I'm always looking for group tickets, and when Roman Anthony had his farewell tour, it was hard to get tickets. Well, guess where I got them? I got them on Game Time. I got a big group package too, which was great because it was cheap and I knew exactly where I was going to sit. I'm worried about what happens if plans change. The Game Time guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first listen. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black, and for all my first listens, if you're listening to this the first thing you do every morning, thank you so much. And if you want a second listen, go check out Locked On ACC with Kenton Gibbs and Alex Dono. They're talking everything on the ACC, including the potential UNC exodus, which I'm a little skeptical about, but we'll wait to see what they have to say out on Locked On ACC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, getting into the final 2 players, I'm going to get into a defensive player now because I know there's some defensive heads out there that are really pumped about this upcoming season and some that are very worried about it. One name that I am very I'm interested to see What this kid can do is linebacker Jason Hewlett out of Michigan. BC this spring had a linebacker problem, which wasn't really a problem because they didn't have a spring game, but watching scrimmages, practices, they were down to like their bare minimum of available tight linebackers to even be able to play. They had Griffin Collins, they had Von Pemberton and, Palawe Fahua, like just a few guys. That's all they had left. And then they were just playing, their walk-ons because Kamori Dixon was out. Owen McGowan was out. Bam Crouch was out. Jalen Blackwell was out. Like everybody was out. So you're watching this going, man, this linebacker group is thin. Now, to be fair, throughout spring, Bill O'Brien had made it very clear that almost all, and I think it's all of them, are going to be back. So it wasn't like, if you listen to what he said, and as long as all that was, being upfront, and I think he was, all those guys were going to be back, your depth wasn't going to be that bad. Still, when you're looking at who your middle linebacker, or if it's going to be Bam or if it's going to be Owen McGowan, you still wanted at least one more guy. Bryce Steele was there too, and he practiced somewhat at times, and obviously he has a whole other story to go along with that. But they brought in Jason Hewlett, and this was possibly the biggest, one of the biggest transfers. The one I'm going to talk about last is the biggest that they brought in because he's an athletic linebacker, former, I think he was a 4-star at Michigan, just was buried on a defense that was just super deep. He's coming in this summer, and I'm very excited to see, put him out there with Bam, and you have two super freaky athletic linebackers. All of a sudden, your linebacking group is looking good because then you can use Owen McGowan. I'm not sure how Owen McGowan and Hewlett are going to kind of, battle around, and where do you find time for Bryce Steele. All of that is going to be kind of predicated on what Hewlett looks like. Now, McGowan, this is a guy that's been here forever. Obviously, the staff really loves him. He had some good moments last year. But you're also, if Hewlett's ready to go, you want to use him too. So what is he going to add to this defense? And really, how talented is he? Obviously, BC's really excited to get him in here. I think he was the highest rated transfer they have. At a position of real need. So I think Jason Hewlett will be someone that folks are going to want to know about, and I can understand why. And the final one is one I've talked about ad nauseum, but I'm going to continue talking about him because it's going to be the topic of conversation for the next month and a half, and that is Dylan Lonergan. I just gotta see more. I like this quarterback battle between Dylan Lonergan and Grayson James is not done yet. Bill O'Brien said so last week. It's going to continue. And really, I think we know what we have with Grayson James. I mean, was he a 5th year at this point? Like, we know where he's at, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, he's totally fine. And he had a great month in November. If he's what you want, you go with him. But we don't know totally what we have with Dylan Lonergan. I saw him during camp. He looked great. He looked like a game-changing quarterback. But this summer is going to show if that was, just early excitement or if he really is taking himself to that next level. Because if he takes himself to that next level, does Bill O'Brien start him? You feel like you might need to. But if it's kind of close, do you go with the more established guy with Grayson James? Again, something we have talked about here a lot. But man, that is going to be the biggest thing. I'm telling you, you guys are going to want to know every pass he throws. I'm going to have to chart them all, write down, he is looking good on the intermediate stuff, the deeper stuff. I'm going to be there. I'm going to tell you all about it. Okay, I'll make sure if I can't make it, some of my writers will be there. We're going to have eyeballs on all of that. And Dylan Lonergan will be the biggest name to watch for. I know a lot of folks are excited about Shaker Rising as well. Sure, he's exciting to watch for too, but don't really expect him to be a big role this year, so I'm not super excited as I am about Dylan Lonergan. That wraps up today's show. On tomorrow's show, we're going to continue getting ready for camp. We're going to continue talking about some of those key storylines heading into practice. What do we need to be watching for? What are the things that are going to be happening? I'll get into all of that here on Locked On Boston College. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247 or on Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, Facebook, TikTok. I'm available on everything. If you're looking for Boston College news and analysis, just hit me up. And I hope you come over to Eagle Insider as well. That's where my written work is. And we have a great team of writers over there as well. And thank you so much for making Locked On Boston College your first listen every single day. And I'll see you all again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.